Hello, I have to tell you my plan of what we need to do with the Catholic Church. I've been thinking about this, and then now I feel like I have to say it. I was just working on my project, Google Earthing Boulder, and all the photos of Boulder in the past on Google Earth, connecting the Boulder to its location in Google Earth. And I've done that with, but I had to take a break and do this. But I did that with Rome too. And I'm not done yet, but I have like maybe a month or something left. Not that far from being done with Rome. And then, which gave me the idea, we need to rebuild Rome, and that ties into the Catholic Church. So, Rome. Or well, let me just say really quickly what we need to do to the Catholic Church. We need to suck in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church needs to sell off all of their holdings around the world, and then use the money to rebuild Rome. I think it would pay for it. Because I actually didn't do any research about the Catholic Church before I did this video. I just did it on a whim. But yeah, I think that they're really wealthy. They own like churches all over the world. They have all the clergy they pay. They own telescopes and all kinds of stuff. They have like all kinds of business interests, like the Papal States. And I know that what the money that they could bring, if they sold it and brought it back to Rome, they could maybe build all of it, or at least get a big chunk done. There's a trend in the world starting to ignite, I can notice, of people wanting to rebuild stuff. I think somebody said maybe they wanted to rebuild the Colosseum. But I think eventually people are going to want to do that. We're already doing so much damage with subways and everything, vibration and acid rain and everything, that we're always having to refortify those things. So we might as well go ahead and refortify, rebuild it, and reuse it. Instead of having concerts outside of the Colosseum, you have them inside. That takes people back into history. And so we need to rebuild all of Rome. I think that's it has benefits in lots of different ways. I think it realigns what the Catholic Church and Rome actually is. I think people should realize that the Catholic Church and Rome are the same thing. The Catholic Church exists because of Rome. It exists off of the legacy of Rome. And it's the example for the world of, the best example for the world empire. And so if you want to be an example to the new world, then I think that is what you should do. That's in line with the new world. I think that another trend for the future is people starting to identify with their local area and trying to create individual flavors for certain towns instead of have just kind of this one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter neighborhoods and towns and stuff. It's good to mix lots of different people together in one place, but it's also good to have places that have their own identity. That is what we have been accustomed to since the beginning of civilization. We've had these little, tribes or city-states and stuff. And also to not try to veer away from our tendency to have people who get too powerful, and there's no need for the Catholic Church to be all over the place doing rites and rituals and owning things and having titles for people. to revolutionize the Catholic Church by just contracting it back to the city of Rome simplifies it, I think, in the same degree as what Jesus did to the Jews when they said, okay, the Christians said, okay, we don't need to do all these old rites and rituals. We don't have to, take an actual lamb, carry it out to the outskirts of the city and kill it, because that is, getting rid of all of our sins. That's actually why Jesus died, so they didn't have to, that's one reason. So that's the same thing, that's the Catholic Church owning all the different churches around the world, people doing their masses and their, all that stuff is overhead, increases the overhead. And we need to decrease all of our overhead. That's how you keep your economy in line. There's two parts of it. If you want to have a strong economy and increase in civilization, you invent machines, technology, and systems to make everything easier, but you also don't waste. Like a penny saved is a penny earned, and so having colleges just to get degrees, that's the same thing. It's just creating infrastructure, which just burns away all of the extra economy that our new technology gave us. We should just let people take care of themselves, and then they'd have enough money to buy nice bicycles and just ride their bike all day long and not even work, instead of paying into the church and the schools and everything. So, so if the Catholic Church does that, they could set the example for everybody else to not try to make money off of somebody across the world, like franchises and imperialism. Because people, like I'm working on Google Earthing Boulder right now, like I said, and I was noticed a lot of I have 901 old pictures of Boulder, but a lot of those photos I got from Boulder Library, and they have these watermarks over them. So why do they do that? Are they trying to make it illegal for people to use the photo? But that's from more than 100 years ago. I mean, it's in the public domain, right? So, it's like people trying to squash the electric car because they need to make money, or people wanted to go to war because they wanted to make money off of the arms and oil and everything. So, it would set an example to just streamline. And, and if Rome could be the first to do that, it would create even more money for tourism, and they would make their money back, and they'd get even richer, and then they would be that world empire. They would be that world capital, and they wouldn't be, causing problems and pissing people off, trying to be greedy and keep their holdings, out in other countries. And meanwhile, having Rome as a ruin, they could rebuild it, because Rome, when it was at its height, like in 209 AD, they have the Tabula Plana Romana, the map of Rome, so you can rebuild it. And I'm rebuilding it on Google Earth right now. And Rome at its height then was just filled with, jam-packed with coliseums and theaters and racetracks. And it was all in the area about the size of Boulder. The Aurelian Wall is about 20 kilometers. And there's even more on the outside of it. So out of any city that ever existed, and compared to any city now, it has way more capacity. Oh, and also if you wanted to add the baths, it had like 1,500 baths, public baths. And, each of those I think had like a lap pool and stuff. So, a lot of big baths with huge, huge pools and lakes also. So, and hills. So you could fill Rome up. If you rebuilt it like it was then, they had 1 million people in that area. You could build, if you built it the same it was then, just small rooms, you could jam pack with people and fill people up with the Coliseums and racetracks and have people performing. You could have the biggest number of people performing in the theaters and the Coliseums and in the races than any other city by far. All the roads are narrow. It could be a purely bicycle road, no cars, just people getting around by bike. And that would be amazing place because, for people to get together in mass like that. Because people are becoming so social that people are going to want to be communicating with all different kinds of people and not just digitally but in face-to-face. So people would naturally go to Rome, and they would in the Colosseum, instead of having gladiator fights, they'd have fight suit fights, like how I can explain on my website, where people they wouldn't do MMA without the just punching in the head anymore because it's not good for the brain. So everybody just fights with the fight suit because you don't get hurt, and then the fight suit says if you lose or win. So everybody goes through, but not just people don't just watch like they did in the past. They would participate. So you have that's what all those because the baths were filled with little practice areas too, rooms for that kind of stuff that they were doing. So, and then the races, instead of having chariot races, you'd have chariot races too, but mostly bike races around the Circus Maximus, which is like a half kilometer around or something, or a kilometer around. It's pretty big. It's like 500 meters. And it's just straight away, and it can seat 150,000 people, which is the biggest stadium that ever existed. By far. The biggest stadium, I think, isn't it like, oh man, I can't remember the number, but the biggest stadium is a racetrack in America, and I think it's bigger, but it's not much bigger. It's like 200,000, but it goes around like a 4-kilometer racetrack, so that's not a real stadium, I'm talking that, like if your bike races, it'd be too far if you wanted to see it. Or even, other stuff. So, I think the biggest stadium that's an actual stadium is in Pyongyang, Korea, and that has like 110,000. So it's way bigger than any stadium ever built. And so you just rebuild it how it was then. And then if you rebuild Rome how it was then, it will bring back all of people's interest in history. And then people will start to memorize history. And once we all memorize history, we'll be able to see in the future. So, and we won't have to have elected officials anymore. We just have pure democracy because we're all educated. So, we all just vote on it. And then you would start a trend to invest, once we fix the economy, do whatever we want, in rebuilding all of the historical towns. Because I've been watching lots of videos lately, and they've been popping up. We've been having all kinds of amazing discoveries of ancient technology, big monolithic structures and buildings cut into rocks. And there's a guy, Brian Forrester, has interesting videos. Petra is 12 kilometers long inside of, it's a city in Jordan in this canyon. And there's big rooms inside the walls, just that they just drilled out into the granite. And so if we rebuilt all of that, it would be beautiful, Oh, people could bike tour all over the world and visit all the places. And then they would be visiting more beautiful places than anything we have now because it's built into the nature. We're not utilizing the best parts of the nature. We're just using it as a museum. But if we actually lived there, it'd be so beautiful, especially now with our technology. We have better lighting, air circulation, and yeah, you just visit all these amazing places, and then but they would be looking exactly like they did in the past, so it would ignite your interest in history. And yeah, maybe they'd have their own like museums too. You'd have a mastodons in there that they re-engineered from their DNA. But what else? Yeah, so that's the future of religion. The future of religion is just interest in history and the history of religion will just fall into the subject of history because it's just the history of, it'll be under the history of thought, history of social structure and stuff. So so the Catholic Church will just be I think contract just back into the city, and the Pope will be the Pontifex Maximus, and will live. There will be no emperor, just the Pontifex Maximus, who will live up on the Palatine Hill and watch the bike races from up there. Yeah. So is that all? Yeah, and that way, we need to start a economy where everything is like self-sustaining energy. Nothing has to support lots of other people. So if you have a kid, instead of you having to support them, they would just get into the industry that you teach them to do and get supported by the government, like with bike school. They wouldn't have to, like a communism. Yeah, so same thing with the city. The city's like a macrocosm. It's like it's a self-sustaining entity from all of the tourism that they would get. And because right now the Catholic Church is kind of parasitical. They economically, I've heard bad stories about them, shysting people and all of that, those rites and rituals and holdings. It's like, why? There has to come a time where you be less wasteful, and you hit a wall. Like, people are losing interest because it doesn't make sense to have something owned by something across the world. So it's and if the Catholic Church did it, because it's the oldest institution, then it would pretty much pave the way for that kind of thought to just become extinct. So that's what we need to do with the Catholic Church.